Hello and good afternoon. I think at 33 minutes we'll get started. So thank you very much for everyone for joining us this afternoon. And on behalf of the CLA, I'm delighted to welcome you to what I'm sure will be an informative event. My name is Anne Maidment and I am the Director for the Southwest for the CLA. The last 12 months have challenged businesses to think differently as to the management of their businesses and perhaps how they're run, and including what and how they deliver their products to the consumer. And it has highlighted opportunities that may not have been as clear before. And with changes coming in UK agriculture, perhaps it's time to think about alternative options for our land use. We're very fortunate today that this event will bring together a group of excellent speakers who will guide us through their experiences and opportunities that are out there in both contract growing within communities and kitchen gardens. I should remind you that today's event is being recorded for future use, including availability to other members, and it will be available on our website after the event. If I could ask, and I think all of you have already, whilst the speakers are presenting, if you could turn off your videos and mute so that we can focus on the presentations. And then if you'd like to ask anything in the chat bar, which will be on your right-hand side, you can open it at the bottom of your screen. I'll be monitoring those to ask during the Q&A sessions. Equally, I hope we can start a discussion after the presentations and we'll shut down the share slides so that everybody can see each other and we can put the videos back on. So you've had the biog sent to you in advance of today, and we're going to start by hearing from Matthew Reimer, who's the founder and chief exec for Happily. So if I may, I will hand over now to Matthew.
Hello and welcome, and thank you everybody on behalf of us all for joining us today. I hope you gain something from this. It's a very exciting time at the moment, if not a challenging time. I want to explain very briefly what Happily is about, why I founded Happily, a little bit about my background perhaps, and then how I met Ross and how we as a board, as a business, saw an opportunity to really get involved in growing the and realizing a definite opportunity going forwards for landowners, farmers, and communities in terms of growing for and connecting to local markets on a commercial scale. If you could just move. So a number of years ago, you get to an age and a number of years means all sorts of different years. It can mean decades. But I have a friend called William Bunbury who has an estate in Ireland. And he took it on and had a sawmilling business that was losing money, and they were basically creating a disparate range of products off the back of their woodlands, whether that was fitted kitchen stuff or stuff for boat builders or whatever it might be. But being a very old landed estate, they were meticulous with their record keeping. And he said to me one day, he said, "Matt, can you come over, because I don't know where we're going to go with this. We're losing lots of money, but it's integral to what we do. But I'm not sure whether I just need to shut it down and that's going to lose jobs and all the rest of it." And amongst all the different product that they were making were a couple of cutting boards, and they've been selling these kind of chopping boards. And my idea was, turn them into a brand, connect them, create the empathy with your family, the Bunbury name, call them Bunbury boards, and to cut to the quick, every board tells a story, but actually enable a means by which people can buy those chopping boards. And by entering that code online, they can see exactly what tree, because you've got all that information, make it transparent, empower the consumer to see exactly what tree that board came from, why that tree was sawn up into planks, you know, had it, you know, was it in a storm, was it old, was it part of a woodland policy, or whatever it might be, and tell that story, because you can get a lot of cutting boards out of one tree, you know? And that business and that brand just flew. You know, it moved into Waitrose, to Selfridges, Harrods, and 300 or 400 stores in America, because even though that board at 30, 40, 50 to 100 euros was so much more expensive than an imported Chinese chopping board. Wooden chopping board says what it does on the package, but it's because it told the story, and it connected the consumer to feeling good about that purchase and understanding it and appreciating it. And I thought at that moment, if only you could do that with food, or with food and drink, where the consumer is buying stuff, as in food or drink, and not actually knowing where it's from, and because the ingredient supply chain is completely hidden behind all the marketing shenanigans that go on, and I was well aware, because I was pretty much shunted off the family farm at 18 or so, because my mum said there's no future in it. And I went ahead and developed my software business, but farming, we come from a very long lineage of farmers, and I was absolutely determined to somehow secure the provenance from seed or birth, and enable through the supply chains, which can be incredibly complicated, and enable the consumer to actually have a truth. And to cut to the quick, and I'll keep using that phrase because I can ramble and I'm keeping an eye on the clock, but and it was almost slightly ahead of its time. This whole sense of happily. So happily isn't a red tractor. It's not a pasture fed. It's not a. It stands for nothing but providing a means of validating the ingredient supply chain behind your food or drink, and enabling via a QR code the consumer to see exactly where it's from, and thereby creating a level playing field. So, for example, you know, on my forays, and I traveled the country pretty much, but especially Cornwall, which is where I discovered Ross, I realized more and more how much the provenance is being stolen from the primary producer and made up in all sorts of different ways. So therefore, farming as an industry hasn't been sustainable. It has not been sustainable without significant subsidies, many of which would argue are being almost, you know, usurped or taken advantage of naturally, commercially by the buyers in the supermarkets. And you realize that actually, if you look at a menu, and around here, I discovered that there were local Hereford steaks. They were local because they're from a local catering butcher. But that very butcher showed me the boxes of steaks. He said they're from South America, and Australia. In fact, in terms of the Hereford steaks, they're from Australia, Hereford cattle in Australia. But they're Hereford and they're local, and it's not for me to tell the restaurants or my pub restaurant buyers what they should be telling the consumer. And you end up with this almost conspiracy of mistruth. And then you sit back and you think, well, no wonder farming suffers so much, because it's not engaging and connecting with the consumer. Now, what is happening now is incredibly exciting. You know, we're entering a new phase. There are generations coming through. They don't want a brand They want transparency. They want honesty. They want to know where their food is from. And that's a terrific opportunity for this industry. You know, there's a lot of opportunity for the agricultural industry, not least precision farming, not you know, all aspects. But the point being that for farming to be sustainable, for the consumer to make sustainable choices, and the generation, our children now, or our grandchildren, depending on what age you might be, you know, are the ones that are going out into this world committed to saving this planet, because it's on its knees and very populated. And therefore, this is a real opportunity to create an integrity of a supply chain and a production cycle that they can see, that there is nothing hidden. I was lucky enough to build a board and an advisory board that I have around me, not least chaired by Peter Ginman, who was a non-exec director of Red Tractor and sees the issues with that. And I won't expand on that, but the fact is that never mind all these schemes, and there are so many schemes out there in terms of trying to, you know, advise the consumer on you know, welfare standards, on these standards, on the other standards. But actually, it's an educational piece that's needed. It's a level playing field. It's that consumer to be able to think, well, they're saying that they're a farm brand, they're saying that they're a sustainable brand, but that doesn't really count for anything unless you know that they're paying the right price for the food down the line, or what you know, what are the miles, and the rest of it. And in a sense, the consumer demand is catching up with this philosophy and this dream that I've had, which is to allow a direct communication through the ingredient supply chain through to the consumer. I'm very excited by what we're doing. Moving on to Happily Kitchen Gardens, as part of my foray, and I met various people in Cornwall, and I'm sure, because such a patriot of Cornwall Ross is, you know, he'll. You just moved on to a slide that's moving on, but the in Cornwall, because there's such a sense of community, because there can't be that level of deceit, if you like, in the food game, you know, there's a lot more honesty. And guess what? They've become renowned for their passion about food, about provenance. And when I met Ross, and he was one of a number of people I met in Cornwall when I went on my little kind of tour, I was gobsmacked by the fact that he had 3 or 4 acres of land, of which, subsidy-free, he was making a very good living, employing at beyond minimum wage someone locally, and actually having a quality of life by growing and supplying directly without the middlemen, and working with chefs and local restaurants, and in fact restaurants across Cornwall. And Ross will come on to explaining how the whole veg box thing is growing at pace. So our objectives with Happily Kitchen Gardens is actually to create a network and host a network and provide the knowledge, commercial wisdom, the technology, the route to market for a whole range of growers that are looking at their land and going, do you know, I want to start exploring areas that we can move into that actually create viable growing businesses, you know, free of any EC subsidy, effectively. So our objective here, and if you look at this slide, is to help landowners and farmers, and working with organisations like Plunkett and others that you will hear from shortly, but develop new commercial sustainable income streams develop community engagement, pioneer and lead. It's almost like my great-grandfather started founded the Gloucester Milk Depot in 1926, which then became West Midland Farmers, and it became this cooperative. And in a sense, the whole farming industry is missing that now. And rather than lots of different farmers setting up their own schemes and local schemes, building their own websites, learning from trial and error, what we're trying to do is sustain and support a network where the experience, the discounts, the learning can all be shared across the board. And I think that's essentially what Happily Kitchen Gardens is about. But just on this slide, it's you know, the reducing the carbon footprint. We all know that the consumers wanting and following Brexit indeed, but wanting, you know, more of a commitment to buying local, but it's got to be at the right price. But there's got to be then the engagement, because food is perceived as too cheap. And there's that opportunity here to actually, as Ross will explain in his engagements with chefs, is they start understanding, the consumer needs to start understanding the supply and demand, the care, the difficulties with growing or rearing food. And then the opportunities to create new attractions, you know, because people they want to engage, they want to be interested. You know, Ross holds a number of events at Padstow Kitchen Gardens. They're quite lucrative. You know, we've now signed in Blenheim Palace, part of in their walled gardens. Their walled gardens used to supply one duke and his family. You know, they're going to be supplying, as of next year, many restaurants and many members of Blenheim, you know, through veg box schemes, which is really exciting. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for them to hold a series of events at Blenheim, all about, you know, the Happily Kitchen Garden, and it's an opportunity to repurpose staff and land, and this doesn't take a lot of land. So it's almost going back and going, you know, there's a big move towards rare breeds, and we have them here on the farm, pedigree Gloucesters, but it's actually, we've got to accept the fact that as a population, as a consumer base, they're moving more towards vegetables, towards fruit and salad crops. And we can get really exciting with those. We can really create premium. And it's actually it's a backtrack, but it's a spin on where we used to be. And then on the back of it, as Ross will explain, you know, he's got pigs because they supply, but he started with the kitchen garden, but now his pig unit is viable because of the kitchen garden, because of what it returns to the kitchen garden, and because of the customer base he's developed through the kitchen garden. So our target markets, or for those that we're working with, like Blenheim, you know, is restaurants, it's hotels, it's caterers, it's campaign and special interest groups, because this ticks so many boxes. Schools as well, because we work as Happily very closely with co-op childcare, and local residents and visitors, and actually creating almost that sense of you're part of the community again. You're not a farm that waves goodbye to produce on the back of Arctics, going who knows where. Yeah, if you could move that on one. 3 minutes to go. Okay, oh, crikey. Right, so yeah, we can move on from that one then. I think I've explained that. And also there's a bit of video coming up with Ross and Jack. And I think Ross will talk through this. So if we flip this one, I just want to explain, if we move on from this slide, I just want to explain, yeah, produce in the box. So Adam, that's part of my board and very backing what we're doing, you know, but the point here, and it's as Blenheim is looking at working is that once you have that customer base, once you have that engagement online using a lot of digital, then you can grow cut flowers. Yeah, it's a big market. You can, well, that's in Blenheim's case, be selling their water, but if eggs, meat, dairy, condiments, bakery, you know, it's all about a farm not distancing itself from the consumer, but engaging. Yeah, and if we click on. Yeah, and I know there's a speaker later that's going to reiterate this with some more current stats, I think, but veg boxes are, as I think we all know, are going exponential, you know, and there's so much around that one can deliver. So, yeah, next. Yeah, so what we're also providing, I am blessed that I met in 2004 a particular software developer, and around him I've grown a team of some 22 developers, which has enabled me to pursue my dream with Happily, but also develop a range of software products and solutions for various clients. And in terms of Happily, this is all about, you know, right, so not only is there the experience and knowledge and commercial savvy behind what we do, but in terms of Happily, us creating a customer database before anybody sows a seed, but we are also providing a produce portal for the consumers, a chef ordering app, which we already have and use, a menu connect app, which is all about people then when they go into a restaurant, they can then see exactly who produced the produce, where it's from, and it's creating that seamless sense of communication, which is where the market's going. And obviously then also click and collect. So it's trying to create that facility and that umbrella for someone wanting to turn some redundant acres of land, preferably good land, that into a commercially viable business without trial and error, because that's where Ross's experience comes into play, I think. Next. Yeah, so this is effectively, and I'm trying to open up the people's thinking here rather than selling exactly what we're propositioning, but so you're aware, our arrangement is very much working out and discovering within a radius what markets are there for you, and let's keep it strong, keep it local, keep it 25 miles, and then forecasting exactly what you can earn, you know, conditional on weather patterns, conditional on others, conditional on what polytunnels you might have, and yeah, a lot of these projects will start with just one. Yeah, and sharing our experience and knowledge, training, ongoing technical support, consultancy across cultivation, cropping, and management. Ross will be the first to admit he spent years through trial and error, making a lot of expensive mistakes. He has a good business model. It's replicable, we believe. Software provision, the marketing behind it, the business planning, because, you know, there is a sense of a lot of landowners, a lot of farmers working very, very independently. And I think, you know, the time's come around, it's almost that 30-year cycle of going, let's almost work as a cooperative. Price point guidance, because Ross will come on to that, but it's all about agreeing prices at the beginning of a year with your restaurant, so they have fixed price points, but an understanding of supply and demand. Crop innovation, I think Ross might again, I'm not trying to load too much onto you, Ross, but explain that particular vegetable that was pioneered by you and Rick Stein. And cultivation innovation, you know, central buying power, surplus crop disposal, because you think of freezing herbs, you think of pickling, you think of jamming, so many practices that are coming back to the fore, because it's all about managing glut and servicing shortages. So that's kind of where we're coming in as a you know, and we would love to talk to people on this webinar, you know, about how we could potentially help. But I personally, and I know Ross agrees, think this is incredibly exciting, and we're delighted the CLA is providing a platform for us to, you know, talk through this and you know, open up some eyes, I hope. I've got one more slide. I've forgotten about this. Yeah, so the reasons for Happy Kitchen Garden is a very fast-growing market. Yeah, it's meeting the consumer trend, local provenance. It's meeting visitor trend. It's all about, you know, experience of learning to cook, learning to grow. A surprisingly early operating profit. The positive carbon footprint impact, which believe me, and a lot of us on this call will be of a generation where we're not quite so savvy with kids coming out of school now. They're on this, thank God, because they need to be. It's organically scalable, so you can start off and you can grow it according to demand. You know, we had a call last week from a fast food chain wanting 2 tons of greens a month from March because they want that traceability. Well, we can't do that, but with a network of kitchen gardens, we potentially, you know, could distribute that, you know, across the network. And it all ties into, yeah, it's all about developing a customer base. So it helps leverage a platform for a farm shop enterprise. And as with Blenheim, it creates the opportunity to involve tenants, to channel through the landlord and their enterprise. And we're very much at the fore and wanting to be at the fore of regenerative farming practice, which, as some of you will be aware, you know, is growing apace, and it's very exciting stuff. And Ross is spending a lot of time actually researching this. And there's opportunities, not just through global warming, but the genetics of the seeds of you know, of biotech, of actually growing an awful lot of things that we'd have never considered growing in this country, and with it comes premium. So it's an exciting time, and I just ask you just to be open to what we're trying to, you know, achieve here. And by working together, you know, it's a powerful thing, potentially.
Brilliant. Matthew, thank you very much. Brilliant introduction to the subject and to Happily. I'd now like to hand over to Ross, just to introduce himself. And I think we're starting with a video, but if Ross could come on the screen, and we'll go from there.
Yep, hello, can everyone see and hear me okay?
Yes, perfect. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Yes, so I believe we have a little video of the farm. Should we start with that first, and then I'll explain about my backstory and Happily Kitchen Garden? Oh, okay. Well, seems like the video isn't coming up. So yeah. I will start talking about my background and where my journey began, really. So I'm from a farming family. We've had our farm in Padstow since about 1850. And even before that, we were farming in the local area. Always been a mixed farming. Growing up, I liked to play around at the farm quite a lot, but I wasn't really into farming massively. I enjoyed looking at the animals and whatnot, but I wasn't into really getting into the farming side of things. So I've become a chef, and I really loved it. I'm a really passionate chef. I'm passionate about local ingredients, produce, provenance, sustainability. So I was working for Rick Stein. And when I first started working for him, it was when he did his Food Heroes program, which you may remember. And that was when Rick really put Food Heroes on the map. I really respected him for that. And he stuck by his guns. Some of those people that were on those Food Heroes program must be 15, 18 years ago, are still his suppliers now. So that's where my love of food began, and I worked my way up to head chef for Rick Stein. I was part of his head chef team, and all the time I had in the back of my mind, what's going to happen with the farm. I was the only son for my dad, and dad was running it alongside granddad, and I didn't really know what was going to happen because, as I said, I wasn't too into the farming. I didn't really understand it fully. I didn't know how it made money. I know they get subsidies, and I just thought we need to try and find a way to diversify. My dad worked very hard, and my granddad did his entire life to keep the farm in the black. And as you all know, as a lot of you being farmers, it's really, really difficult. So I was a bit dubious about going into what they were doing. What I did was my granddad asked me if I did it, cleaned it all out. It was all overgrown with shrubs, and it was a nice little project for us to do together. And we basically just planted a bit of everything, old school, like an allotment. And we had too much, we had surplus. We sold it to the restaurants in Padstow. They wiped us out in no time, so we filled it up again. I always remember a brilliant story of my granddad. He was so angry at me because I pulled up all his beetroots when they were just smaller than a golf ball. And he wasn't very happy because he wanted beetroots that were like this. And I took them into the restaurant, got more money for them than we would have if they were big beetroots, because they were baby beets. And the ground was available again. And he went, "What, you got more money for those small beetroots than we would if we'd let them go big?" I was like, "Yeah, and we've got the ground back 2 months earlier than we were meant to." So he was absolutely kind of, flabbergasted by the fact that happened. And then we started growing quick cut crops, salad leaves, mustard leaves, things that turn around really, really fast. So you're not just spending your entire season, for instance, something like a cauliflower from seed to it going onto someone's table, you're talking so many months. Whereas cut and come again kales, cut and come again leaves, rainbow chards, etc., they're all very, very financially viable to make money. So I put up a polytunnel. I was still head chef at the same time, and I had a new baby, so it was really, really hard work. And we went to about 1 acre and a polytunnel, and did all right, made enough money to kind of top up my salary and have like a nice holiday off the back of it, but it still wasn't a business. And then about a year down the line, I had to make the mind up whether I was going to be a chef or continue with the farm. So I just jumped for it, and luckily Rick Stein's company let me go down to 3 days a week, and I set up a kitchen garden on 3 to 4 acres. Quite a lot of hard work, especially doing 3 nights a week in a restaurant as well. But I didn't have the finances to have all the equipment that I got now, so everything was being done manually, hand rotating, turning over my polytunnel by hand with a fork. But it did start to make money, and one of the reasons why Happily Kitchen Garden is so viable is because I wish I could go back 12 years and tell myself what I should be growing, the equipment that I should have bought, what I should have invested in, and the restaurants I should have linked up with. So the whole point of Happily Kitchen Garden is basically a bit like my business model, but it will be somewhere else, and hopefully it can help to change someone else's farm. The way Padstow Kitchen Garden has grown is amazing because it's helped to diversify the whole farm. So off the back of Padstow Kitchen Garden being a success, people started coming out and seeing that the view was amazing, and my parents have now got the bottom part of our farm as a wedding venue. We also have pop-up restaurants that are up at the farm. Our livestock wasn't making any money. We were selling direct to the kind of selling to market, whereas now we do our own pigs, we butcher them down, and we sell them as part of our veg boxes and as part of our Honesty Box farm shop that we've got. So all of a sudden, mum and dad's side of the business as well has started to make profit for the first time in a while. We hold pop-up events, also garden tours. We have the local WI from all around the area come and visit, and it isn't loads of money, but it's a tour, and you give them a cup of tea and biscuits and they have a look around the garden, and yet again it's another income just for giving people a tour. So I genuinely believe that the kitchen garden can help rejuvenate a whole farm, because off the back of that your cattle can start making you money, because you can start doing beef boxes, you can have chickens that will be laying eggs that will go into veg boxes and go into your farm shop. One of the things where I'm really lucky is because I'm in Padstow, we've got such high-end restaurants that want sustainable produce and they want to know exactly where it's from. A lot of people don't have that. So what me and Matthew are creating this year is a huge database of restaurants that are interested in buying this produce. So rather than rather than just having to say, there's your kitchen garden, cheers, good luck, we're hoping that by the time you approach us and say, we want to be part of Happily Kitchen Garden, we're going to have the restaurants already on board. So what we'll do is, if we quickly switch to this video, because there was a video that we were going to play at the start, just so you can see some parts of like my little Honesty Box farm shop and whatnot, please. Thanks for that. Sorry, I'm not sure if there was meant to be any sound. I don't know. I just provided the photos and bits and bobs for it. I don't know if there was some like cheesy background music or maybe me talking, who knows. But the other great thing that we've got is the connections that I've built over the years with the chefs. And I know Matthew mentioned about Honest Burger asking us if we could put 2 tons of greens into their restaurant in London. Well, not only that, I've had a restaurant group approach me today and ask if I could provide 500 baby gems a day, nearly every day of the year. Well, I can't do that because I'm committed to my customers. So the customer base is really out there. I get numerous emails from all around the country asking how I can get my produce to them, and it just isn't really viable for me to do that. Whereas I'm hoping that there are other farmers around the country that could do direct sale into Bristol, could do direct sale into London, the Cotswolds, or even just in their local area. You might be in a bit of a foodie hotspot, as I am. One of the other good things that we've done is I've built up a bit of a network of friends in terms of seed suppliers, tool suppliers, garden equipment, and we've managed to I get discounts off of them because I buy as much. And I said, look, if we get more guys on board with you, will you be happy to do discounts? So that's already going to be done for you. Now, one of the most exciting things, which it hasn't happened yet, is Matthew's company is going to develop this software. And I'm really excited about it because all of my sales are done over WhatsApp, email, phone calls, word of mouth. We want to bring it all onto one app. So the chefs can order via an app. So you're not messing around. You're not having to ring chefs up mid-service and ask to find out if they want salad leaves tomorrow morning. You're going to be able to go on, they're going to be able to go on this app, order what they want. You can put your stock on there. You wake up the next morning, hopefully nice and early because you've got loads of produce to sell. And you'll then just be able to harvest it, and it'll be all on record and all invoiceable. Now, me and Matthew are going to trial this app as soon as it's up and running, firstly with my business for the seafood restaurant. But for me, it would be amazing to be able to just upload a photo of some beautiful rainbow chard on a Friday, and it goes all the chefs, it pings up on their phone Monday morning, rainbow chard is available at this price, place your orders now. Now that would save just so much time and admin, and that is part of the service that Happily Kitchen Garden is going to provide. Also social media, we're going to be there to help with social media. We've started building up our own Happily Kitchen Garden social media, and hopefully once the other people come on board and Glenn and Palace come on board, we're going to be able to really boost the social media. And social media is so important in terms of the kitchen garden. So we've got a screen up here, which I'm just trying to see a minute because I've got something in the way. So my season could be very different to yours, because if you live near a city, you're going to be seasonally different to what I am. My main season the season kicks off in Padstow around Easter, and then nowadays it doesn't stop until Christmas. When I was a kid, it was literally the 6 weeks of the summer holidays. I'm really, really lucky to have that. Now we sell to lots of restaurants that are smaller, and that's fine because it ticks over. And there are some veggies that don't make you as much money as others. For instance, carrots, there's not a whole lot of money in them. But if you go into a restaurant with high-end things such as tender stem broccoli, bags of salad, rainbow chard, and you go there with carrots as well, it looks really good on you, and also is a little bit extra money. Now, we'd like to think that most people could earn a living of anything between 25 to 40,000 pounds a year and employ someone as well on a kind of, well, my guy isn't on a minimum wage, but he's on a good wage. He's fairly flexible. And this year, we've decided to take someone else on as well, just mainly to keep up with garden maintenance, weeding. I mean, the less machinery you can use, the better, really. That's definitely part of the sustainable side of things. I don't know if Matthew wants to come back on for a sec and ask me any questions of anything I've missed.
Yeah, no, that's great, Ross. I think it's quite useful for you to just almost explain as a case study. And I know it's an unusual restaurant, Rick Simon's seafood restaurant, but just in terms of what you're supplying there and how they, you tell me things, and some of them are going to be confidential, but in terms of how with COVID, they still have a significant life that's only benefited you by dispatching meals where people still want that provenance, and it's all part and parcel of people getting stuff to their door. Yeah. So even if they're not eating out, what they have delivered, they want to know where it's from.
Yeah, so what we do is we sit down at the start of the year, and we basically do a growing plan with the chefs. We also agree a price at the start of the year. Now, restaurants love this because veg price fluctuates throughout the year. Mm. I think it's just hassle. Changing your price throughout the year is hassle. Go somewhere in the middle and then agree that price with the chef. The chef knows where he is all season long then. You get the growing plan. You don't get a full-on contract. You don't get solicitors involved, but you get a gentleman's agreement. And you get a bit of a contract in place just to say that they will buy that produce, because you're going to have to put a lot of money into it. Now, the restaurants are currently shut, and lots of the restaurants, which was really good for my business, decided to go to online sales of veg and of ready meals. And I've actually sold more veg this January than I have any other January. It's been absolutely bonkers. So that's been really good for my business. And I think if COVID's going to be hanging around for a little bit, and maybe some other things, I think I wouldn't be worried about setting up a kitchen garden, because there's always ways to sell your veg. At the start of the first lockdown, I didn't do much of a veg box business. I used to do about a dozen boxes a week just to people I knew. At the start of lockdown, when the restaurants closed, I completely converted to a veg box business with online sales. It's brilliant because the money's in your bank before they've even had their veg box. And I just went delivering around the north coast of Cornwall. Didn't go more than 20 miles in distance. Still managed to sell all of my veg.
A really important thing here that in terms of sustainability, you use very little irrigation. you're on a windswept hill, you're using local labor, the carbon footprint is so low, you're not using chemicals or pesticides, and it's such a world away from the industry in Spain.
Yeah, well, when a guy who is one of the head guys of a big seed company, I won't name who it is because he'd be embarrassed, he come and visited my farm when I was first deciding to give up chefing, and he said, if you ever set up a kitchen garden on this farm, I'll eat my hat, because I'm exposed to all the elements. We're right on the river, we've got Bodmin Moor, winds blowing at us from both directions, we've got stony clay soil, and you know, we've made it happen. You know, we're selling.
And that's what just got me when I met you, Ross, years ago, because I just thought, my God, you know, you can make that work. And you did it haphazardly over years. You know, you're a former chef, you had some contacts, so you had some market, but happily, the whole point of happily is to actually deliver market to potential happily garden businesses. But and that's a phenomenal thing, and we all know the consumer will pay a premium because the nutritional value of a cucumber or a pepper or a lettuce from Spain, where we don't know, you know, we know nothing about it apart from its sell-by date. You know, it's a world away from growing in our own country, using local labor, and actually being able to validate and tell the story. And for the chefs, as you said, you know, being able to really boast about that story, you know, and getting their front of staff to do the same.
Yeah, and so just this quick slide here, me and Matthew agree that anybody that sets it up, you'd be silly to go bang right in 5 acres and try and have exactly what I have straight away, because you'd have a lot of investment, and if you have some crop failures, you're going to turn around to me and Matthew and say, well, what was that all about? So year one is quite conservative, really. As it says, modest achievables, you know, make sure that we're covering all your costs, and make sure that you're making some money, get a nice amount of restaurants on board, a low amount of veg boxes, and then the next year, you really go for it. And by year 3, you're right up to where Padstow Kitchen Garden is. I'm not sure what the next slide is, because I know that they're running over. There's a produce timeline. You can find this on my website, actually. If you go on padstowkitchengarden.co.uk, you can just see how we grow. And one hard thing is the winter months. It is the January, February, March, April. It's hard because you don't have any income, but at the same time, you're preparing for your new year. I spent today cleaning all my irrigation, cleaning out the pipes and washing it all. So I know when I put my seeds in on the 1st of March, I'm going to turn the irrigation on and it's all just going to work. One thing I haven't mentioned, I did say about tours and whatnot, is events. If you're lucky enough to live in an area where people like to wine and dine, the events, chefs, if you're not into cooking, chefs love cooking outside. The events are a massive boost for me. I haven't counted them in my figures when I tell Matthew what the kitchen garden turns overall like makes a year. But we actually seat people in the polytunnel. So when it's empty in the winter, we preserve the veg during the summer. And you could get chefs come to your farm. They could have a little walk around. They get to get the fresh air, see the animals, sit them down. Sometimes we do bring your own. Sometimes we sell alcohol to them. And it's a really good way. You make a lot more money selling your veg and your meat that you've grown and reared directly via a plate of food.
And can I just add to that very quickly, so one of Happy's clients is Best of Our Counties, which is part of Mid Counties Cooperative, which is the biggest cooperative in the country, with 500 or 600 stores. So one of their, and they enlisted us to, and they've been a big supporter of ours, and saying, right, we want everyone to be happily validated, that if they're saying that they're this, then you need to make sure that they are this. And without going into names, there was a jam and pickle company that turned around and said, we can't go happily transparent because not a single ingredient in our jams or pickles is actually British. So the strawberries is a puree from China, and yet they're trading they're trading on the whole plank of without, you know, but the whole plank of provenance and of premium and of clever marketing. Again, I've said it before, but But actually, that's where Happily Kitchen Gardens can then move on and create a brand that actually helps and supports and carries an integrity, because you know, we are eating food. Never mind what the label says. That is all from all around the world, and there's no connection. There's no handout. You can't connect to it. And yeah.
I think we've ran over a little bit. So if me and Matthew had it, there's a little video of me and Jack Stein coming up, just talking about the importance. Sorry, the video looks a bit weird. We are friends, really, but we're just like 2.5 meters away from each other. Because
so yes, what we're going to do, we're going to play that after the break, because we just think it might be safer just to check that we can get the sound to work for that. So in the meantime, I thought what we do is just move forward the question and answer session now. So Matthew, actually, if you want to jump back on screen, and if anybody else would like to join us on screen for a discussion. So if anybody does have any questions at this stage for Matthew and Ross regarding Padso or Happily, please do feel free to either put it into the chat bar or come on screen so that I can see you and direct the question. And I just want to start off by actually asking you a question, Ross. So what do you think are the biggest lessons that you've learned in establishing your own kitchen garden and going through this process?
I'd say that it's, because I don't want to sound money orientated, but business is business, and it's learning what crops make you money. And that's something that I've spent years working out, and it's something that's really difficult to do, because when you're so busy growing 25 varieties of veg and 5-acre kitchen garden, and life is just busy in general, you can sometimes be a bit of a busy fool. And I've now really reined it in, and I know what makes me money. Whatever makes me money, I grow a lot more of. What doesn't, I still grow, but I grow a lot less of it, just for my farm shop and for my veg boxes. And I also just feel that over the years, how much how many mistakes I've made. You know, like I reckon 12 years ago, you could just call me like a Google kitchen gardener. I went and did a couple of courses, and now you're kind of like, the second there's a problem, we're on it straight away. And that's what me and Matthew want to try and provide to help people, rather than them having to go through years of buying stuff unnecessarily, or just making mistakes. You know, as with me being the head consultant of Happily Kitchen Garden, hopefully we can help people to not make the mistakes that I spent years making.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Actually, Leslie Wills has put a couple of comments in the chat bar. The first one about restaurants are shut at the moment, and do you feel it's wise to concentrate on them at present? I mean, in terms of the COVID situation.
Yeah. It's interesting because, in fact, one of my close friends is director of Happily and also on the board, Clifford, who has several restaurants and a hotel in the Isles of Scilly, and is also a local farmer. He's going to have a splendid season when things open up this summer, and provenance does create premium for him. We're being connected and being contacted by restaurants, not by our own volition at the moment, because they are sitting back and they are thinking, right, what can we do differently going forwards? We made the decision, and we made it with Blenheim Palace actually, not to dive straight into a kitchen garden for this year, but to map it out and develop the customer base and everything else for next year, for the beginning of next year, which is what we want to do with a series of others, because they're incredibly uncertain times. But at the same time, we're very aware of the whole veg box side of it being equally powerful. And it's just getting that mix right. It's a very valid question, because they're in a difficult situation. My feel on it is that your pub restaurants, pubs doing food, pub grub, are the ones that are going to really suffer, you know, at the end of this, or are suffering now, without doubt. I do think that restaurants will, you know, restaurants with the right values, you know, people want to eat out.
Yeah, and it was interesting actually, you mentioned in a slide earlier, Matthew, about your focus and links with regenerative farming. And I think that's where Leslie Wills is asking his question from, about Ross, whether you're a no-dig kitchen garden and do you save seed? And I think that's all part of the trend at the moment with regenerative farming.
A very good question, Ross.
So, you know, I'm currently looking at going and because my sustainability report that was done by the Eden Project was I'm like 99.8% sustainable. I think it was some plastic use, which was the only like 0.1% that let me down. But we're all really aware of this regenerative movement. I hope everyone's watched Kiss the Ground. It's really important to watch that on Netflix if you haven't seen it. My whole kitchen garden isn't no dig, and it's a shame because I've only really learned about the carbon impact on the planet Earth over the last couple of years. I genuinely didn't really know too much about it. I spent all these years building up a kitchen garden where I plough and I rotivate and I do all this, so I can't change overnight. So this year we're going to do a 50 by 40 metre patch of no dig. I know that's a small part of my 5 acres, but if we tried to change it overnight, my business would just fail completely. So we're going to aim to be 50% no dig within the next few years. Personally, I'm not overly worried about the no dig at the moment because my parents have got about 40 acres of grassland that we don't plough. They've got about 14 acres of woodland that is untouched. So our farm is an extremely sustainable farm, but I do believe in the no dig movement. Definitely, I think it is the right way to go. Maybe setting up, if you want to make serious money, start off with 50-50, no dig and a bit of dig, see how they go side by side, and then gradually move to whichever way you want to go.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And in addition to Kiss the Ground, I would highly recommend Gabe Brown's Regenerative Farming. It's a book that's available. I'll put it in the chat. It's for those just learning about the subject now. Are there any other questions from anyone attending before we go for a short break?
Sorry, I see Leslie asked about seed saving.
Oh yes, yeah.
Leslie, I only seed save some varieties. Lots of the varieties that I grow that are F1s, if you seed save them, they'll grow back not very good the following year. For instance, some of the special tomatoes that have been, it's nothing to do with genetically modified, it's proper good techniques that they've used. If you save them, they will revert back to one of their crosses, and you could end up with a really horrible skin on the tomato the following year, or a really bitter tomato. But the heritage varieties, so the dragon's egg cucumbers or heritage tomatoes, we do seed save them. I don't seed save any of my brassicas because I grow like 15,000 kale plants and it just wouldn't be viable. And if there was a problem with those seeds and I sowed 15,000, I would really be in trouble. So I make sure that I source them from responsible placing. I'm friends with lots of CEOs of seed companies, so I do my research and make sure I know where the seeds come from.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Ross. Another question from Leslie. Do you have perennials like Taunton Dean?
I've got a couple of Taunton Dean kales on the farm, just more for show. They're a really good crop. They're one of the most original ones since kale moved from sea to land. They're a brilliant plant, but I don't have many for commercial. The chefs aren't massively keen on them.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Okay, at that stage, we are due a break. So if I could ask everybody to return at 5:40, and then we can continue with the agenda. So thank you very much so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully everyone has returned. So we're just going to start by playing the video with Ross and Stein.
Jack, what's the most important thing for you and your business about having a kitchen garden right on your doorstep?
Well, there's lots of things, Ross, to be honest. I think like number one is the produce, and feeling that connection with the farm, with you as a grower, sort of getting to understand over the years as well, like how you've done things and you've tried things out, things work really well, other things don't, and understanding that at the end of the phone, it's not a wholesaler, it's a farmer that you know, and you can come up here and look. So for us, it's the produce, the seasonalities help loads, and also with our staff coming up here, having a look around, seeing that this is a real working farm. You know, it's not kind of this kind of picture perfect kind of thing, that it's actually a proper farm. And I think that gives our chefs, who then train the front of house, and our customers the information about everything that you do up here. And I think that just connects us better with the land. You know, this is a place you can come up in an afternoon with your chefs, whereas you can't really go out on a fishing boat or to an abattoir. It's not really the same. You come up here with the chefs front of house and that, and you just look around and you can get inspired, really. And I think our job as chefs is to kind of tell your story to our customers. So anything that comes out of the ground here obviously is going to benefit everyone.
Yeah, and I suppose the chefs coming up here, as you said, they get inspiration, but also it makes them look after the produce more when it comes into the door, because they've seen the hard work and love that's gone into growing it as well.
And it's like anything, once they've seen it and they understand it, the chefs treat it differently. And then it's like the same with the fish that we land here versus the fish that comes from the wholesaler, like Matthew Stevens. The fish that's landed here gets looked after better, and your veg is the same. But I think also that translates to how the chefs see everything that comes in from you. Like, they're much more excited by it rather than stuff that comes from the wholesale, which we invariably have to use some of. And yeah, I think you're exactly right. But it's also for them, and then the front of house, they're telling your story, so they get excited because on the menu it says Padso Kitchen Garden Padrons or Padso Kitchen Garden Calettes or whatever, and people go, oh, what's that? And then they get to tell a story, which then it comes full circle then, because you've set up a little farm shop here recently, which you're selling stuff that because customers are going to want to know where it is.
Lots of my customers that come up here said, wow, we never knew about you. We were eating at Rick Stein's seafood restaurant, your name was on the menu, we tried your tasty padron peppers, courgette flowers, etc. And then they're coming up at my shop. So it works really well from a PR point of view from both sides, I suppose.
And but also more than that, there's the kind of the nuts and bolts, as you selling that stuff, we're selling it to the customers. And then there's the roundabout stuff like your farm shop and the kind of peripheral stuff. But then there's the sort of more modern social media kind of stuff of chefs from London coming down here and being inspired themselves. And a lot of the chefs up there, they will never have had access to this until they come and travel and come and see your farm and others. So, it gives you that extra marketing to that kind of generation of young sort of young to middle-aged kind of young professionals in London who are watching these guys and girls' social media. So it's massively beneficial, not just for us having your produce, which is the number one thing, and having that story, but also the whole area is uplifted. Because you sell to other restaurants here, I see your produce in loads of restaurants all around, and that everyone is using you, and everyone is therefore being able to market it to their own kind of database. And it's quite comforting when you go to St. Q or wherever, and you see your produce in there, and you go, oh, I know these padrons or whatever, not by name, but so it's the whole point is it's good restaurants are where good produce is, and this is a great produce so close to being less than a mile to the restaurant, and it just brings everyone up because once you've been here, you don't really want to go back to buying stuff that's come from other countries. You want to buy stuff that's come from here. So it's a massive benefit.
Even though there's more work involved, so when my baby leeks turn up and they've still got soil on the bottom and they've still got their tops on, whereas you can buy them from a wholesaler with all neat little packs. But when they come in those neat little packs, there's no romance there, is there? It's just pack ripped open, baby leeks prepped for you. Whereas when it's got the tails and the tops on and you're prepping it, people really know that it's come right from the ground.
I mean, I went and worked in this 3-star down in France, and they have got the same relationship with their kitchen gardeners and their market. And they just, you always think 3 stars, it's all perfect, everything like this, but all their veg comes in dirty, and they love it. And if something is doesn't look exactly right, they don't care because that's how it's come out of the ground. And I think that's something that's going to be more and more prevalent going forward as we see more kitchen gardens opening, is people start going, you know what, it's like buying a piece of meat that's perfectly square, or a bit of fish that's perfectly square, versus the whole animal or the whole fish. It's the same here. Like, we've found loads of stuff over the years with you, stuff that you can use parts of the plant and different things you've put out that are just like are so creative, and you just think, wow, from like one little turnip you've got like pickled turnip stems, or the the pickled rhubarb chard we made,
fennel roots that you can't buy
exactly anywhere. And then that's when the relationship gets really interesting for anybody looking to do it with a restaurant. That's when the restaurant can start to go, like, now this time, January, February, we're looking at growing for the year, and we know probably 80% of stuff will work, 20% of stuff will fail. But actually watching the failure is quite useful for us as chefs, because we forget. We may want, 1,000, spring onions or 10,000 radishes, but sometimes it's just not possible. And then you go, right, how can I substitute that for something different, like kalettes or whatever it might be, padrons, or something to put on the menu? So it's a two-way street, and I think it's really important as kitchen gardens and restaurants have a closer affinity and they start to build that. It's about what we want, but also what you want from us, because you're not going to go and stick in 10 rows or something if we're not going to buy it. That's just not right.
And that's where that relationship in the winter, discussing your needs for the summer, and I know we spoke about it before, but having that relationship, having you on the end of the phone, or like one of your exec chefs, I can phone up and say, look, I've got 200 cucumbers. Yeah. Don't know what to do with them. It's glut. It happens. It's just the same way as sometimes we lose a bed of salad. Sometimes you can have double the amount of salad. And then you guys think, well, what can we do with these cucumbers? Well, let's get them pickled and they can go in the burgers. And that's how a kitchen garden chef relationship,
like, say if they accidentally plant iceberg lettuces by accident.
Yeah, like I did.
Come and take them.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the thing. And you think, and again, that's when you start to learn, you start to think about like countries like Italy, and you always think of Italy with their tomatoes and that. But towards the end of the season, like, you have a load of tomatoes, don't you? Like, we took all your green tomatoes. But in Italy, they'll then preserve those for the winter, and they'll make passatas and can them and this, that, and the other. And that's something that we need to learn how to do better, because this time of the year with the hunger gap, it is quite difficult for us to get lots of produce from you. There's lots of kales and broccolis and things like that. And again, it's just trying to build that up. But also the demand, when you're a restaurant company with a close relationship to a kitchen garden, they're able to go, you know what, I know I can guarantee X amount of income this year because they're going to buy this, and that enables you to then invest in, like a new cedar or a new polytunnel or something. And it's just, this place is built from one tiny polytunnel with a few cucumbers to now like nearly 10 acres with pigs and everything like that. So it goes to show, and it's like, for me, like, the produce is obviously the most important thing, the training and that, but also it's like the relationship with you, and meaning that this area has got great restaurants and great produce, and seeing that on the menu for customers, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and it just goes to show how a small 5-acre garden or 10-acre garden can completely diversify a farm in so many different directions. Like you said, we've got the pigs, we've got the sausages, we've got the chickens, we've got the eggs, we've got the kitchen garden, and it's a small pocket of land which you can earn a living from and make employment.
Yeah.
Well, look forward to planning the new season with you.
Yeah, right on.
Thanks for popping out.
That's all right.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that one. So we're going to move swiftly on to our next presentation, which is from James Alcock, who's the Chief Executive of the Plunkett Foundation. James, over to you.
Thanks very much, Anne, and good evening to everybody. So it's a great pleasure to spend a little bit of time explaining a bit about the Plunkett Foundation, who we are and what support we offer, but also the potential relationship with CLA members and happily as well. So if I start with the first slide, just to introduce Plunkett a little bit, just to confirm, we're a national charity for those that don't know who Plunkett is. And this month, in fact, we are 102 years old, so we've been around for a bit. And you'll probably wonder why I'm here on this webinar when I say what I'm going to say, which is that we're not really very well known in the UK for supporting the agricultural sector, farmers, landowners. And it's a real surprise that we don't work with that sector, because that's exactly where Plunkett Foundation started. We were founded back in 1919 by Sir Horace Plunkett, and Sir Horace had done some amazing work in Ireland towards the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century in introducing the cooperative model to the agricultural sector in Ireland. And essentially what Horace did was he helped farmers at a time when they were recovering from the aftermath of the potato famine, and then also besieged by competition from America and Europe, with particularly sort of grains coming in. But he helped farmers to set up farmer-owned cooperatives to help them get their goods to market, and particularly well known for setting up cooperative creameries or dairies. Plunkett's works, after that, he founded the Plunkett Foundation to spread that work internationally. And our work was involved in setting up cooperatives in not just the agricultural industry, but healthcare, education, rural services across the world. And it wasn't until the 2000s and onwards that Plunkett's primary concern was working across the UK, supporting community-owned organisations to support the benefit of rural communities. If you have heard of Plunkett, it's probably through our work supporting community-owned shops and pubs, of which I'll mention in more detail shortly. But currently we represent over 1,000 what we call community-owned businesses, so essentially cooperatives, 700 of which are trading, and I think it's actually 400 now that we're supporting in the setting up phase. So just to define what we mean by a community business, it's essentially a business which is owned and run democratically by members of the community for the benefit of the local community. They are trading businesses, so they have a legal structure, and the majority are registered with the Financial Conduct Authority as a community benefit society. So they're not regulated by Companies House, they're regulated by the FCA. And it's essentially a form of cooperative. So what do they look like and how do they run? If you can, sorry, if we can go back one slide. They are owned by local people, so it's member owned, and to become a member, you essentially purchase a share. Shareholding can be set at anything from £1 up to £20,000. You can purchase multiple shares in the business, but you can't own more than £20,000 in a community business by law. Typically, we see around 200 to 300 shareholders, and when the initial share raising is done at the outset, we often see communities raise anything from 20,000 upwards to sort of 300,000. But there are businesses that go way beyond that and below that. So some communities only set their share price at £1 and only raise a few £100s because they don't need the setup capital. Others, like one of our members in Scotland, which set up a distillery, raised over £1 million. So it's really horses for courses. In terms of how the business is run, those members, those potentially 200 or 300 shareholders and members will elect a management committee or a board of directors to oversee the strategic direction of the business. And then that committee will either decide to run the business themselves by either employing staff and volunteers or a combination of the two, or they might decide to let the running of the business to a tenant. So I work with pubs, for example, about 50% of the pubs are actually let to a tenant. So the community have done the hard work in raising the money, saving the asset, and then they allow a tenant to come in and run the business privately. But whatever way the business is run, it always remains accountable to its members and shareholders. Moving on to the next slide, I've talked primarily about shops and pubs, and will continue to do so because that represents the largest sort of part of Plunkett's membership. But the model can be and is applied to any form of business. We've got a few examples here. In the middle, we've got the distillery that I mentioned at Glenwithis in Scotland. Bottom left, community-owned woodland. Bottom right, a community cafe. And then top right, you're going to hear more directly from Charlotte from Fordhall Farm, and that's exactly who it is and where it is in that slide, a community-owned farm. Some key characteristics of community businesses. Well, essentially, the majority are providing key services, and they become broader hubs. So they're sort of more than the service that they're saving. So I mentioned before, there are 700 currently trading, 400 in the pipeline. And if it's a shop, it's providing much more than that. For example, cafes and post offices, access to financial services, additional health benefits, clubs and societies. A key success factor of community businesses is they very rarely fail. So the long-term survival rate, which is at least 5 years, is a 96% survival rate in that period. But the majority of our members go back well into the sort of early 2000s. Community pubs, not one community pub has ever closed. The oldest pub that we've helped to set up goes back to 1983. And there are over 100 and I think just shy of 150 of these pubs operating across the UK. So quite an incredible survival rate. They're very resilient businesses, so they have huge turnovers. Community shops as a sector represented a £58 million turnover in 2020. Obviously, the individual businesses a much smaller turnover than that, but that's the combined turnover. They are incredibly inclusive businesses and participatory businesses because they involve so many people. Across the 700 existing, 62,000 shareholders for pubs, 9,000 for pubs. They've got large management committees that employ people. They've got volunteers. They've got lots of customers and beneficiaries. So they're involving a lot of people in the running and use of these businesses. They're also creating employment and volunteering and education. So shops, for example, have an average of 3 members of staff and 30 volunteers. In terms of the key benefits, moving on to the next slide, there are lots of benefits coming out of these businesses. And the first is that they are directly employing a large number of people. So collectively 5,000 people are employed across the UK by community businesses. That's more than what Twitter employ. So it's quite impressive. But very often at the local level, they might be the only form of employment in that local community. They're also providing a huge range of volunteering opportunities. That might be volunteering opportunities for older people, for younger people just starting out in their careers. Very often it's providing volunteering and training for people that are most vulnerable, people with learning difficulties, people that have come from challenged backgrounds, people that are struggling with their education and need support to get into employment. The lovely thing about the businesses is they have a huge range of age ranges involved in them, and it's just nice to see different age groups working together, and it really helps bring that local community together. The impact on the economy is really, really strong as well. It's not just about employing people, but it's about the ripple effect through the supply chain. So we've heard a lot from Matthew and Ross about that, but it's about one business will obviously support other local businesses in that local environment. Particularly shops and pubs will be sourcing local food. It will be a key part of their business. A key impact as well is around health, and particularly through volunteering, we see a lot of people benefiting from alleviating loneliness, also keeping active and healthy. But a number of the businesses will also host additional services. So they might have a back room for a health visitor to come in once a month, or they might be setting up things like walking clubs or a cafe on mental health. So it can be very, very varied. And we've seen a lot of that through the pandemic. In terms of environment, there's huge benefits particularly through local sourcing, but a lot of our members have done things ahead of the commercial sector. So we've seen the shops deciding not to have plastic bags, and they've been using the jute bags or encouraging people to recycle. But we also work with a lot of environmentally focused businesses, for example, composting schemes, community growing, recycling, community energy. So a really sort of varied impact, but positive impact on local environment. Moving on to the potential to work in the growing space, as I said before, we don't work with a huge number of growers directly. There's only about 5 community-owned farms that we've helped support, and the potential to sort of grow that is massive. But I think for me, there's probably 3 key ways in which Plunkett could get involved in supporting CLA in supporting CLA members. And the first is that if existing landowners are already producing food that could be sold into a local market, we could potentially help by getting it into local community-owned shops, community pubs, and other local community-owned hubs that are involved in selling and distributing local food. So it's a huge market for CLA members to start supplying into. The second is that you may have some additional land or redundant land that you're not using directly for your sort of core agricultural output. And it may be that you want to sublet pockets of that land to a community group to come in and set up something like a community garden directly. So the benefit would be allowing that community business to be there, growing and producing local food, selling it on into the local community, but not really affecting your own business other than providing an income stream for you. And then thirdly, it may be that you no longer are able or wish to continue the main part of your farming business. And it may be something that you want to see the farm continue to trade and to thrive and be part of the local community. And you could sell it on to a community-owned business, to take it on, but who might potentially want to sublet that back to, or sublet a part of it back to you as a tenant. And that's a similar approach to what you're going to hear from in terms of Charlotte's presentation and Fordhall Farm. If you move forward to, I think if you click twice, you'll move on to the support that Plunkett can offer any landowner that wishes to take up the offer of support from Plunkett, all of which is free of charge. But the first is that we've got a helpline which is available 5 days a week. The main thing that Plunkett Foundation offers is the one-to-one practical business support. So we've got over 50 trained consultants that will come out and provide that one-to-one business advice to you or to a community group setting up a community business. We offer training and networking and events, and all of that currently is provided remotely online. We also have peer-to-peer networking, and we have that via Facebook groups, but also a mentoring scheme. So it might be putting someone that's been in a similar position to you in touch to help you directly. Our website has got a huge range of practical toolkits and resources. We are a membership body, so we do have additional services, including sort of purchasing benefits, but also additional advisory support for members. And we do a huge amount of policy work on behalf of members. So we work directly with government departments like MHCLG, DEFRA, and DCMS. And we feed in directly concerns and challenges that our members face. And we have a number of sort of practical ways that we work with government to alleviate some of the issues that our members face. And I think that brings me to the end. And I think it does ask for any questions, but I know questions will be coming a bit later on. So at this point, I'll hand back to Anne and onwards to Charlotte.
Yes, indeed. And thank you, James. That was very interesting. And I think, as you say, we'll move swiftly on to Charlotte as an example of a community farm. So over to you, Charlotte. We just appeared to lose Charlotte briefly. She's just rejoining, so bear with us. Okay, Charlotte, if you're there now.
Okay.
I think, Charlotte, you might be on mute and your video. Okay, we appear to have lost Charlotte temporarily. What we might do, Kathy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. What we'll do, if you don't mind, is we'll jump to Farms to Feed Us, and then we'll come back to Charlotte as a case study based on when she's managed to sort out the broadband.
Yeah, no problem.
Brilliant, thank you.
Right, well, thank you. Thanks very much. And I hope we hear from Charlotte shortly, because it's got an amazing story. So good evening, everyone, and it's great to be here. I'm Catherine St. Germans, the co-founder of Farms to Feed Us, with Catherine Chong. I'm going to be doing the first part of our presentation, and Catherine will be doing the second. So Farms to Feed Us, we're a nationwide database which connects small-scale, sustainable farms and food producers to the consumer direct. We are a social enterprise run by volunteers made up of activists, farmers, journalists, and economists. We are a community interest company. We have amassed over 3,500 volunteer hours between us since we started, which was last March. And we are entirely voluntary, but we will be doing a crowdfunder next month. We aim to educate the public about farming and what it takes to produce well-farmed food. We use technology to help small-scale and often resource-strapped farmers sell direct to consumers. We do this by providing a tangible, free-to-use resource, the Farms to Feed Us database, and soon, our new app. At Farms to Feed Us, we're working to build a world where all the environmental and social goods, beauty, and joy of regenerative food production are valued by our society and able to flourish. Next slide, please. Farms to Feed Us was born out of a crisis. On March 24th, the night after the UK went into lockdown last year, we arranged a Zoom meeting with some members of a regenerative agriculture WhatsApp group Catherine and I are part of. The world had been turned upside down, and we wanted to see how we could help. A brief background about me. I'm an organiser and a journalist. For 13 years, I ran a large festival in the grounds of Port Eliot, a stately home in Cornwall where I lived with my late husband, Peregrine St. Germans. It was very important to me that all the famous chefs who came to cook at the festival used local, well-farmed produce. I also wanted the punters to see the best of Cornish produce. Through the course of running the festival, I worked with a lot of farmers and growers locally who supplied the festival of over 10,000 people. And then after I left the festival last year, I organised a couple of regenerative agriculture events, one which Rick Stein came to, in fact, more about that later. And I organised the first regenerative agriculture conference in Cornwall in November 2019. And regenerative agriculture heals our tired soils and cares for our neglected ecosystems. The event was a success, selling out in 24 hours. People came from all over the country to it, showing what an interest there is in this subject. It brought together farmers and foodies, interested consumers who wanted to learn more. I like bringing people together, but as the lockdown took hold, clearly there was not going to be any more events happening anytime soon. So back to that night of March 24th, we called together the Zoom, and Ross was on it, Ross Geach. I just got him involved in the Regen Ag WhatsApp group, and there were other farmers, growers and food producers from Yorkshire, the Midlands, Somerset and all across the country. We had all heard about the veg box schemes being overwhelmed with thousands of new customers, while farmers who supplied restaurants had lost their business overnight and were desperately trying to set up new routes to market. A number of those farmers were on the Zoom. All of us had seen farmers pivot virtually overnight in the eye of the crisis. One of the most impressive, I must say, was Ross Geach. He started a veg box scheme to serve his community as soon as the restaurants closed, and there were many others. I started posting about everything that was happening on my Instagram account, and people began to contact me wanting to know how to contact these farmers and the veg box schemes and where they were. I came to the group with an idea I'd had. Why don't we create a national database of farmers and food producers who are now selling direct? The crisis had laid bare the fragility of our food system, and we wanted to highlight the farmers that are waiting to bring well-farmed food straight from a resilient food and farming network that was still flowing. No supermarket and middleman required. Next slide, please. We put out a call for help and gathered a small team of volunteers. We wanted the database to be lo-fi and easily accessible by everyone, including the elderly. It needed to be easily printable and shareable. We created a Google form which was easy to sign up to, with farmers listing their farm details, produce and how to get hold of it, either by collection from community hubs. The farm were less common nearly a year ago, but now the norm for people who were selling and offering national delivery. We came up with the name Farms to Feed Us, and to sign up to a farm was and is free. And as a farmer, if you sign up, there's no cost. We launched the database on April the 4th with 70 farmers who'd all signed up. And an hour after we went live, the Guardian blog picked up on us and did a story on Farms to Feed Us. Suddenly, over 100 people were viewing the document, and in 48 hours, over 2,000 people had accessed the Farms to Feed Us database. Pieces came out in the Guardian that we were trying to help sustain the food chain, Financial Times, Sunday Telegraph. It snowballed from there. And recently we were featured on the Rick Stein's Cornwall programme. I took Rick out on my little boat Puffin and we talked about Regen Ag. So we are a community effort, and we were bowled over by the numerous offers of help from brilliant people like those you can see on the screen now. Farmers, growers, dairies, fishers, bakers, winemakers and other suppliers work hard every day to care for us, to nourish us, to tend to the land and to support their communities. We believe it's time to return the favour using this database as one way you can show your support. Human scale farming based on relationships and respect rather than just profit and expansion helps our communities to grow and allows diversity to flourish. We believe the better we know our farmers and our fishers, the healthier we and our food system will be. Next slide, please. Fred Price of Gathelney Farm in Somerset, who breeds Mangalitsa and Tamworth pigs, was one of the first to sign up to Farms to Feed Us. And this is what he said. The crisis has focused my mind on what the ultimate is, which is to send people you know a box of meat. Resilience, complexity and human scale has been reinforced, and the importance of direct supply chains. I don't want this to be something we do for 6 months until the restaurants reopen and then we go back to business as usual. Farms to Feed Us database is about empowerment, he said, and how we can change our food system by dealing directly. Next slide, please. We've spent a lot of time talking to farmers and growers and producers over the last year. I'm sure one of the things that we do is shining a light on those farmers, and like all the cheesemakers, of which there are 800 in this country. A few weeks ago, I spoke to Mary Quick of Quick's Cheese in Devon about the effect of the pandemic on local food systems, and she says there'll be a seismic shift when the crisis is past. Farms to Feed Us is about empowering people. The Farms to Feed Us database actions everybody. We also believe that the more we educate through Farms to Feed Us and engage the public in farming and the people involved in it, and show the reality of what they do, the greater their support and understanding of the high social and ecological cost of cheap food will be. Matthew covered this a little bit in his talk, but the lockdown did change us. There's been various polls. A YouGov one showed that one of the most important facts that 3 million people have tried a veg box scheme or ordered food from a local farm for the very first time as a result of the pandemic. But the big question is for all of us working in this area, how we harness this new energy and markets once the crisis is over. How do we keep the energy of this moment alive? What will it take to keep consumers loyal to buying direct? How might we use this moment of crisis to help build on some of the wonderful innovations and truly positive changes that have come to the fore during lockdown? Next slide, please. Actually, sorry, should be the next one after that. Thank you. Over the course of the lockdown, Farms to Feed Us, and this last year we've grown a lot. Our database now features over 300 small-scale sustainable producers. More are joining all the time. Our online platforms and social media platforms have also grown. We now have nearly 10,000 followers on Instagram, and our regular blog is filled with beautifully crafted stories. The database has been accessed by over 23,000 people. We'd like to organise a Farms to Feed Us gathering, and we have started some major campaigns as well. And I'd like to hand over to Catherine now to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to go on. I can see that the screen hasn't changed. Please, can we go to slide number 10, please? Slide number 10, please. Sarah, thank you, which is what we do. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Catherine, the co-founder and director of Farms to Feed Us. I have been a global sustainability advisor in the private and public sector. I work with multinationals, governments, and their stakeholders with one fundamental objective. That's to push the environmental and social agendas up the list of priorities, which requires framing, clarifying, and linking the physical and indirect impacts and risks arising from social and ecological changes, such as climate change, and the value and ecological assets, along with economics at systemic or governance level. It also often involves challenging the current market practices and social consensus, and negotiating the priorities with those with the largest bargaining power. And they are almost never farmers, particularly small scales, or the ecology. So both key components of our food systems taking on most of the risk, yet little bargaining power and given the smallest share of reward. So I am sensitive to power imbalance in our food supply chain, and let me tell you why. So I come from a farming family in Asia. My parents were poultry farmers. When I was in my teens, dad was pushed out from the business when the feed imposed on him by the food group he had years relationship with killed all his 20,000 birds. There was an issue with the feed. He never found out why exactly. That was just one too many costly impacts after increasing control from the food company, such as increasing pressure to use hormones and antibiotics to reduce rearing or growth days. So the business became insolvent. That transitioned to a small scale grower because he had no choice. And that wasn't the only one. There were other families we knew who came out from the predicaments worse than us. I was still able to go to university, but with 2 jobs that was longer than my studying hours. So I saw firsthand how poor intervention by large corporations or no intervention by governments can destroy farms and families. So indeed, my interest in social and environmental sustainability stemmed from fears and anxiety from my family's experience, but furthered by the training I had working with large corporations and governments, making clear the economic benefits of valuing nature and people. So last year, motivated by the lockdown, I returned to where my heart is, supporting farming, particularly small scales. I joined Kathy to set up Farms to Feed Us. I focus on the technical and scientific directions, for example, during the early days, developing the database, to then delineating the complex systemic topical issues in agriculture and food to a wide range of stakeholders. The context has been predominantly UK, but we do bring in global perspective. The mission was to foster greater emotional, cognitive, physical connections across the agriculture and food system. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these are the topical systemic agri-food issues we covered on our social media during the last week. We provided breakdowns on some of the more complex issues, focusing on economic, ecological, social, and governance impacts to the farming communities, as well as to the public. We wish to remind the public that agricultural issues ultimately affect all of us. For example, in campaigning for the public support on the crucial legal safeguards on food standards and public scrutiny of future trade deals in the agriculture bill and then the trade bill, we focus on the public's and the ecosystem health, as well as on the impact to the farming communities. Another example is the agricultural transition plan. It was about breaking down hundreds of pages of report into a one-pager for our time and resource strapped farmers. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as we respond to the fast changing environment post-Brexit and with potential regulatory vacuum or relaxation, and as we grow as a very young community interest company, we continue to explore organizational roles on how we could contribute to the much needed systemic changes in the agri-food systems. And one of the guiding perspectives I always go back to is to look at the spread of risks and rewards at systemic level and across the components. So in fact, CSA is essentially about rebalancing risks and rewards through partnership between consumers and farmers. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in 2020, we'll continue to address the systemic risks and rewards imbalances in agriculture and food. Kathy, as is her expertise, focus on storytelling and organizing events that celebrate the joy in agri-food, and I on ESG grassroots and commercial responses. We will continue to delineate systemic and topical issues in agri-food to our growing social media audience, hopefully with more partnership with other organizations to share the precious human resources in the not-for-profit sector. We'll launch an advisory service to land and business owners looking to transition to agroecology or to lease their land to other agroecological farmers. We're looking to create customizational solutions that are guided by science and practice with clear economic rationales. We'll launch an app to offer free ad entry showcase opportunities for our resource-strapped small-scale farmers and producers. In fact, it was in designing this app and 2 rounds of testings with over 100 farmers and producers that inspired me to go on to develop an e-commerce platform to fundamentally democratize the agri-food system based on circular economy principles. So after over a decade of working with multinationals to adopt more sustainable business approaches and governments in the areas of green accounting and impact investing, I feel like it is time to bring my expertise back to what's closer to my heart, because here is a great opportunity to not just challenge, but to create a solution I mentioned earlier, fundamentally in recent rewards, always in ecological, social, and economic terms. But if there is little reward to begin with in agriculture, and that is the reality of agriculture, particularly for growers in the UK, with the decades-long decline in prices, what goes around will always remain small. So I focus on the regeneration for nature and people. It's about repurposing valuable commodities wrongly deemed as waste. It's about true cost, true price, factoring ecosystem services and community social capital, and creating opportunities for new sources of income that I wish my dad and our local farming communities were given the resources to explore. It will be an integrated information, commerce and social networking system designed to increase the circulation of values, increase the economic and cultural proximity between consumers, farmers, and producers as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So at Farms to Feeders, we wish to serve the society at large by working with everyone, particularly those with institutional power, bargaining power, the marginalized or the voiceless. We envision an agri-food future where, I like to paraphrase a friend of ours, one of our earlier contributor, Paul Chalmers, who said, the harsh realities of farming is highlighted along with the beauty and joy of farming. And I'll add, crucially, the ecological, social, and economic benefits of agri-ecology. It is a huge challenge, but luckily we're not walking alone. There is a beautiful community of civic societies here in the UK and around the world. So let's work together to create an agri-food future where ecology and people are able to flourish. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I think we're ready for Q&A. Thank you.
Catherine and Kathy, thank you very much for your presentation, and really interesting to hear more about Farms to Feed Us. Before Q&A, I think and hope we have Charlotte back. So Charlotte, if you're there, do come on to the
I am
screen.
here.
Brilliant. Don't worry, we all have these problems with rural broadband. Luckily, the CLA do quite a lot to help campaign for that. But anyway, so we'll hand straight over to you to tell us a bit more about Ford Hall Farm.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And my apologies for earlier. Me and my husband both at home working and video calling and various other things. So quick reboot of the router, hopefully, and I was back again. But what I am going to do, just to, in case we have another internet problem, if it's okay with everyone, is I'm going to turn my video off. You don't need to see me anyway, and then I'll kind of chat through the slides and hopefully be back for the Q&A afterwards. So I'll just give you a shout when we need to go on to the next slide, if that's okay. I'll just turn off my video. So my name's Charlotte Hollins. I manage the Ford Hall Community Land Initiative. We're based at Ford Hall Organic Farm in Market Drayton. If you want to go on to the next slide, you'll be able to see that we're a pasture-based farm, and we've been farming organically for nearly over 80 years now. If you can go on to the next slide, Sarah, if that's okay. That's it. So we're, as you can see there, we're pasture-based, so we rear cows, pigs and sheep. We're right on the outskirts of Market Drayton, right next door to Muller Dairies in Muller Yogurts, kind of bounded by the main road and the River Tern. So we're a bit of an island, and being an organic farm, that's quite nice as well. Okay, Sarah, on to the next slide. Going back in the farm's history, we were actually a dairy farm in the early 1950s, right up until the mid to late 1970s at Ford Hall. And in fact, my dad, Arthur Hollins, was one of England's first commercial yoghurt producers back in the day. And so we've always been a place which has been kind of innovating, changing, and always been a farm which, for one reason or another, has been diversifying and been engaging and involving the public as well. And there's Dad at the bottom with his favourite friends, the worms. So I mentioned we're an organic farm, and we've been organic farming at Ford Hall since just after the Second World War now. But we were conventionally farming before that. Dad actually took over the tenancy at Ford Hall back in 1929 when he was 14 years old. His dad had died, and so Dad then left school and came to take on the farm with his mum. And really what I'm doing here is tell you a bit about Ford Hall's history and kind of how it's brought us to where we are today. Because we've gone through many ups and downs, and through even seeing the deterioration of the farm after the war, the introduction of chemical fertilisers, you know, our sandy soils got very depleted. and we started to get into debt with those sandy soils. Every year Dad was buying more and more chemical fertiliser, putting that onto the land. It was getting washed out. He was getting less money out from his crops, and as I said, the farm started to go into debt. And the way he found out his way out of that downward cycle was by diversifying, partly by going into organic farming and using the natural systems which the earth has perfected. But he also had a farmhouse restaurant. We had a country club at the farm at one point. Really, he was looking for ways that he could raise finance to buy additional livestock for the farm. Oops, sorry, the little person there as well. Okay, next slide, please, Sarah. And what Dad could see at the farm, really his journey into organics, was he could see that the life was there in the woodland. It was keeping the woodland going, green and lush every year. Yet in the fields right next door, he was ploughing and cultivating. They were producing so little. And so this is what stimulated Dad's interest into nutrient cycling. And he then learnt about the billions of different bacteria, fungi, protozoa and so forth, which cycle nutrients in the soil, provide the food that feeds the plants. And he thought, you know, well, this is a system which has kept the planet going for millennia, and best of all, it was free. And so really that's why he went over to organic farming, because he could see that the fields he was planting and cultivating had so little life in them and were reliant on the fertilizers that he was buying to put onto them. And so, as I said, we've been farming organically then since just after the Second World War, and it's a system which we continue at Ford Hall today. Okay, if you want to move on. And that brings us a bit closer up to modern day. So I mentioned earlier, we're a tenanted farm. We've been farming the land at Ford Hall as a family for 300 or so years, very extensively. It remains organic, 100% pasture fed, livestock are outdoors, you know, right throughout the year. And it's been successful. But then in the early 1990s, Muller Dairy became our next door neighbour, and the landlord saw the potential to sell Ford Hall for them to expand and develop upon. But he couldn't do that while we were still here as tenant farmers, and so we had to be evicted. And Ben and I at that time were quite young. So when I was born, Dad was 67. When my brother was born, he was 69. We were his kind of second marriage, second family. So that's what organic living does for you. But what it also meant was that when Ben and I were both still at school, that's when my parents were fighting eviction notices. That's when the landlord was trying to evict us. And it's also, as Dad was getting older, he was getting into his 70s and his 80s. And there was less labour force on the farm, essentially, and it began to deteriorate. Next slide, please. And after kind of almost 15 years of fighting to stay at the farm, Muller's shifted their focus on another piece of land the other side of the main road. And that meant that my brother and I, Ben, were able to negotiate something with the landowners. It was very last minute, 24 hours before we were due to be evicted in 2004. We managed to secure a short-term tenancy for 18 months, essentially while the landowner reassessed what he was going to do with the land. So you can see how run down the farm was, very overgrown, buildings dilapidated, because, you know, through those 10, 15 years of fighting court battles, all the money was going into legal fees. The money wasn't being reinvested back within the farm. Livestock were being sold off to pay for all the court fees as well. And we took on a very dilapidated farm. We had 140 acres, and we had 11 cows, 6 pigs and 6 sheep. No money, no idea what we were doing. I was 21, Ben was 19, and with young naivety on our side, we thought this was the best thing since sliced bread. You know, how exciting is this? We've got a farm to run. Next slide, please. And so we knew from the very beginning, the only way we'd be able to build the business up was to sell what we had direct to the public. So a little farm shop. One of our 6 pigs came back from the abattoir with sausage, made about £50 in the first weekend and thought we were rich, and then quickly realised that £50 on a 140-acre working farm doesn't go that far, and slowly built the business up, selling absolutely everything we produce on the farm direct to the public, which we still do today. Next slide, please. And so full stocking density on the farm now is probably in the summer months, about 200 odd sheep, about 100 to 150 cattle, between 50 to 60 free-range pigs. Okay, next slide. And so we were able to kind of pay the rent through that 18-month period, but the other side of the coin for us was how we were to secure the farm long-term. The landowners still wanted to sell it for development. You know, we still needed to find some way of securing it. All we'd done was really bought ourselves a window of time when we got that short-term tenancy. And so we looked back in the farm's history and actually thought, well, Ford Hall had always had people connected to it. That's when it was most successful. In fact, farms everywhere were very connected to the local communities. We had very local food systems. Lots of people worked on farms. You naturally played and enjoyed farms. You helped at harvesting time in all these rural communities. And even in rural communities today, so many children have never seen a live pig. You know, they've not ventured onto farms. And we could see at Ford Hall that when people stopped being involved in whatever way that was, that's when it really kind of lost its heart and its life, as it were. So we knew we needed to kind of bring that back, but didn't really know how that was going to work, what that was going to look like. Next slide, please. So we basically organised volunteer parties and opportunities, events at the farm, anything we could think of to get the local community onto the farm, hopefully for it to be an asset, for them to see it's an asset to the local area, something they'd like to help be involved with in the future, and potentially then something they'd like to help us save for the future. Next slide, please. And all of this culminated in a community meeting that we held at the farm in February 2005, almost a year into our 18-month tenancy agreement. And at that community meeting, we asked the local people, you know, what they wanted from the farm, both then and in the future. And we then said what we wanted from it as farmers, both then and in the future. And it was by putting those two things together that we created the community structure that we've got at Ford Hall today. So it's, as James was saying earlier, we're a community benefit society. We issue community shares in the same way as James was talking. I didn't hear all of his presentation, unfortunately, because it was around the time I was getting booted out. But we're a charitable community benefit society. We're called the Ford Hall Community Land Initiative. And it was set up to secure the farm for community and environmental benefit, but for us also to keep farmland accessible and affordable to future and young farmers, and to reconnect people to food, the landscape, you know, farming, the environment, and so forth. So we thought that this legal structure seemed to marry the needs of the community who wanted to be involved with the farm, they wanted to see it succeed, they wanted to be able to visit it, they wanted to be part of it, with the needs of the farmer who needed long-term security to be able to stay there, manage the land. Next slide, please. And so we set about selling our community shares. Ours were £50 each. Ours were completely non-profit making. And completely democratic, as James was saying, so one member, one vote, not one share, one vote. And we were hoping that through the sale of these £50 community shares, we'd eventually be able to raise the funds to purchase the farm. And these are lifelong shares as well, and they can be passed down in a will if someone no longer wants to be a member, or they can be returned back to us for the same value that's paid if someone no longer wants to be a member. Okay, next slide, please. And by the time we got an option to actually purchase the land from the landowners and get ourselves legally incorporated, we were left with about 6 months to raise £800,000, which was the purchase price we were able to negotiate for the farm. And so we set about selling our, you know, £50 community shares, and by opening the farm gate really, and just continuing to get people involved and talk to anybody that would possibly listen to us. Next slide, please. And so that continued with our volunteer weekends, it continued with our events. And really all we did from the very beginning was open the farm gate, allow people to get involved, took people's ideas on board, and that's what opened up doors for us as we went along. It's how we came to know about the community share scheme. You know, community benefit societies didn't actually exist when we set up. It's a different legal structure at the time that's kind of since merged. So it was all kind of very new and novel, and we were having to search out ideas and ways to kind of problem solve our way out of the situation we were in, really. And the picture on the right hand side here is a volunteer that came to do some tree planting with us. We did some hedge laying, and he's actually helped to put a gate post in there around the tree planting area. This chap, Christoph, came from London, never been to the farm before, but had read about what we were doing and was very passionate about farmland staying as farmland and not being developed, but also was really interested in food and the environment and organic farming. And this story kind of repeated itself time and time again. And Christoph essentially went home from Ford Hall feeling inspired, shared the story with friends and family, wrote letters and emails out, encouraging people to buy shares in the farm. And this was how it kind of snowballed. It was people coming to us, getting inspired, and then taking the message back out again. But Christoph was quite a pinnacle part of the story, because he also went knocking on the doors on his street. And one of the ladies on his street happened to be a journalist for the Daily Telegraph. Next slide, please. So we subsequently got this article on the right-hand side there in the middle of April 2006, which was about 3.5 months into our fundraising. We had about 2.5 months left, and we'd raised about £77,000, of which I'd never seen that kind of money in my life before, so I was pretty excited. But obviously our board of directors were much older and wiser and more worldly than myself, reminded me we only had 2.5 months to raise over £700,000 still. And it really snowballed after this article came out, and it really showed us how much support there is out there for farming. You know, so many farmers contacting us who've lost their farms over the years, and this was a way of them being reconnected back into the industry again. A lot of people have seen the way farming had struggled over the years and saw this as a real practical way of them being able to support the industry. There was lots of different reasons people got involved. Next slide, please. This has come out of order a little bit, sorry. So from 2006, we were able to raise the funds actually 24 hours before the deadline. We've got the £800,000 there, predominantly through community shares, and we have about 8,000 community shareholders at Ford Hall now. And this is how the farm looked when we purchased it in 2006. Oh, no, Catherine, sorry, not yet. Sorry, darling. Our office was in that porter cabin at the bottom there. And we spent a few years trying to get ourselves sorted and organised, and then realising we need, sorry, darling. Sorry, juggling things at this end, that we needed to reinvest within the farm as well. And so we renovated these buildings, moved out of the office. And if you want to go on to the next slide. This is how Ford Hall looks today. So we're in community ownership by over 8,000 community shareholders. We've got the farm, shop and cafe there. We rent the farm out to our tenant farmer. He's got a 99-year tenancy agreement at the farm, and he runs the farm business like any other tenant would. It's a normal limited company. He has his own staff, and he also runs an event catering company alongside that. And then as the community body that owns the farm, which is who I work for, we're there to utilise the farm as a community resource. And essentially all the other things that are going on at Ford Hall are then run by the community trust, which owns the farm. Sorry, just something popped up on my screen. So I don't know if you can see at the bottom there, but our 140 acres at Ford Hall, collectively in the summer month, we can be employing over 100 people between the businesses at the farm on a very extensive system where the livestock are outdoors all year on grass, free range pigs. It's not about volume, it's about quality, but it works because the diversity that we've got there and the connections that we have with our local community. Next slide, please. So that's as I said, and I think the important thing is what we've, in the way that we've set it up at Ford Hall, is we've been very conscious about giving the farmer long-term security, because we believe that when the farmer's got long-term security on the piece of land, then he has or she has the incentive then to invest in the soil, in the land for the long term, because it's a piece of land that can be passed on to their future generations, their children, or to others. Whereas a short-term tenancy of many conventional farms now, 5, 10 years, 20 years if you're lucky, you are understandably trying to work out how much money you can make during that time that you might want to take with you onto another piece of land, rather than thinking how you invest in that land in the future. So we've tried to break down barriers within the industry in the way that we've structured what we've created at Ford Hall, but we've also tried to create new opportunities. So if you want to go on to the next slide, please, I'll just summarise some of the things that we're doing at the farm today. So the community trust, then we organise lots of school visits right throughout the year, both from a conservation and environmental perspective, but also food and farming. Okay, next slide. We have a care farm which supports adults with learning disabilities, and that's contracted through the local council. So this is completely self-financing. Next slide, please. And we have a youth project that supports vulnerable young people. So they might have be struggling at school, they might be on the point of exclusion, they could just be struggling with confidence, they could have a mild learning disability themselves, and we work with them doing practical activities on the farm, predominantly to build their confidence and their self-esteem and their belief in themselves for the future. That's a grant-funded project. Next slide, please. We continue with our volunteer weekends, and it's incredible actually how much our volunteers get out of it. They do start to be part of a wider family, and for those of you in farming, it can be quite an isolating industry, and actually involving people in the farm is not as scary as it sounds. And I think we've had maybe 5 weddings and about 6 babies from people that have met volunteering and been part of the farm. So I wouldn't want to say it's a way of dating, but it succeeded in many ways. Okay, next slide, please. We have free access to the farm throughout the year through our farm trails. That's open to members and non-members to encourage the community to access and be part of the farm. Next slide. We also have yurts, which we rent out for glamping, which gives us some trading revenue. Next slide. And weddings, again, another trading arm, which we run through our cafe. Next slide, please. And most recently, we've put up our Straw Bale building, which is a 250 square metre building built with our youth project, our care farm, our volunteers, and provides residential accommodation for short courses, retreats, Cubs, Scouts, school visits. So this is only just opened last year. Obviously, it hasn't had much outings at the moment because of COVID, but we are looking forward to making the most of this in the coming years. It's a great new resource that we've got the farm, and built on car tie foundations, a cedar shingle roof. You know, it's an ecological building through and through. Next slide, please. And then our tenant farmer, Ben, as I said there, runs his own limited company. He's got catering trailers, which he manages all of the catering at Edgbaston Cricket Ground. And he's got the farm shop and he does the farming. And those are all conventional businesses. And he then pays a rent back to the community landlord, which gets reinvested back within the community projects at the farm or conservation and kind of ecological activities. Next slide. So when we were setting it up, obviously there were lots of concerns. If someone doesn't mind putting in the chat how many minutes I've got as well, because I've lost track. Most of the concerns, I have to say, came from Ben, being a farmer and not used to kind of working on his own a lot of the time, going into this kind of community ownership model. How is that going to work? Is everyone going to be telling me to grow cauliflowers this year and tomatoes the next year without understanding kind of the soil and what works here? And board members, you know, we have an elected board, they're a voluntary board, they change around all of the time. Could they pull us in a different direction? How do we administer all these shareholders? What's the infrastructure? How much is it going to cost? Are we able to make a profit? You know, we had all these questions and none of them have been problems. You know, we do have a lot of shareholders, 8,000 shareholders across the world, in fact, that we have to administer. But we have the income from those shareholders every year through subscriptions to newsletters and other things that covers that cost. Our board members and our shareholders all bought into a collective vision at the beginning. And so they're all hugely supportive of our approach at the farm. And yes, we can make a profit and we want to make a profit. The difference is the community body which owns the farm, then we reinvest that back within the project to benefit the environment and the local community. And if anyone wants to ask me any more questions on that, they can do, but I will move on because I'm not too sure how much time we've got. Next slide, please. So I mentioned long-term security was a big thing for us and a big motivator in trying to kind of break down those barriers and encourage good land use and encourage also a long-term connection and relationship with our community. So succession is secure. So if Ben and I had been wealthy enough, for example, to buy the farm ourselves, we could still do all the different community projects that we're doing today. We could have diversified in lots of different ways. But there is the risk that kind of 40, 50 years down the line, if neither of our children wanted to continue the farm, then it could have been sold off in the future for development or any other use and it would be lost. And so actually by taking the land value out of the equation, placing that into community ownership, you kind of remove that value as an incentive to take the farm in the wrong direction, I guess. It's there for perpetuity, for the benefit of the community. And if Ben's not farming it anymore and that tenancy isn't inherited by his children, then there is an opportunity for somebody else to come into the industry and have that opportunity, have that long-term tenancy, live in the farmhouse and manage the land in a sustainable way with a viable business behind it. But also having 8,000 shareholders means we've got a loyal customer base. Obviously not all of our 8,000 members do shop with us on a regular basis, but you've got many of them that support us, that want us to succeed, and they are having a vested interest in us succeeding, so they will continue to support us. And sometimes that is buying from the shop, sometimes it's just saying good things about us and spreading a good word. We've got a direct avenue to engage and connect with customers and members. And I mentioned earlier about that reduction in isolation and loneliness. It's that extended family feel. Both Ben and I were two of those people that met our respective spouses whilst they were volunteering on the farm. So we were two of those kind of 5 marriages that took place. And there's a strong and combined vision which gives strength and unity for an agroecological approach. And that has been incredibly powerful to us. We didn't really know where this was going to end up when we started off. Our prime concern was securing the farm for the long term. We wanted to engage people, we wanted to rebuild those connections, but we didn't really know exactly what it was going to look like. We didn't know exactly how it was going to work, and we didn't really know how successful it was going to be. And we really have learned as we've gone along. And the more we kind of go on our journey, the more we see the benefits of it, and the more it adds strength. And having all of those different viewpoints is wonderful because it gives healthy discussion. At the end of the day, we're still all heading in the same direction, and we're still all heading to the same end goal. And that makes Ben and I think, gives us much more confidence to face the battles that come our way, the problems and challenges that we face, because we know there's such a strong will of support around us. And it's difficult to explain how powerful and useful that is, and gives you the kind of the belief that it will succeed. Next slide, please. So I'm kind of probably repeating it a little bit. I've probably said a lot of that. I think Ben and I have been amazed by how much people have actually got out of being a shareholder, which doesn't make them any money. It doesn't return any financial dividend to them. It's more of an altruistic investment. But the empowerment that people have got from those shares has been incredible. I still speak to people today that gave us £50 in 2006. I've actually never visited the farm since, never donated anything to us since, yet remain as engaged and empowered by their share now as they did, 14, 15 years ago. And I think that's an incredible power that structure and that ability to involve people has. Next slide, please. I think we're kind of coming to the end then. So yeah, the best thing that we did was to open the farm gate, start the conversations, listen to people, and evolved our journey with them, and make sure that it was inclusive, and made sure that the problems we were trying to solve were collective, and there was a collective answer as well as a collective discussion around it. I think that's probably it. Come to the next slide, please. Yes, so we're open to the public if anyone wants to come and visit us. If anyone wants to know more, we do free guided tours, COVID allowing, obviously, when everything's calmed down. And I don't know if James mentioned through his presentation, but I do work as an advisor through Plunkett Foundation, kind of sharing our learnings and our journey of what we've done at Ford Hall to help others kind of follow suit or kind of share some of the principles. So I'll come to an end then. I've no idea where we're up to on time. I think there's a few time for maybe a little bit of questions, but if you want to take it back, Anne, and then
brilliant.
I'm here.
Yes, that's great. Okay, so we'll stop sharing the presentation. Charlotte, thank you so much. That was so interesting. And actually, from a personal point of view, being a Harper Adams student, you were my first case study back in 2003, and it's incredible to see what you've achieved, and it looks wonderful. So congratulations, and it just shows what you can do with a bit of determination. So I think we do have time for some questions. I know we slightly overran on the presentation, so I'll just invite any of the attendees to join us for a question on the screen. I think whilst we're waiting for some to join, perhaps Charlotte, I could ask, what do you think about this idea being rolled out elsewhere? Do you think, I mean, I know it's taken a number of years and a lot of work, but do you think it is possible to replicate what you've done elsewhere?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that you look at all these different projects that are going on, and obviously there's lots of different community supported agriculture schemes out there, and you take the principles from them and you have to build a model that works around your individual situation, the land that you have, the ownership model that you have in place. There are many that have already kind of followed suit in what we've done at Faldall, and I think the great thing is that people take little bits and they copy one aspect and maybe not another, and I think that's the right way of doing it. I think you should. I think every farm is different, every community is different, but the principles of working together, the principles of trying to put systems in place which work for the long term, not just for the short term, and then it's looking at the right mechanisms that will support and facilitate that in your individual communities.
Yeah. And obviously, James, I'm sure you've seen that through the Plunkett Foundation, just through the advice that you give and support.
Definitely, and it's really difficult to know why there aren't more community-owned farms. I think the only answer is that there aren't more Charlotte Hollands, and I've seen Charlotte present many times, and it's an inspiration every time to see it. And it's just every time you hear it, you just wonder why haven't there been more examples? And I think where we've been involved in supporting it tends to come from the community have initiated it, as opposed in Charlotte's example where it was Charlotte and Ben as tenant farmers, and so I think that's really the opportunity here to kind of promote the model to existing landowners, because it really is a model that can work for the benefit of the community as well as the tenants and farmers.
Can I just vouch for that, James? Charlotte and her passion and inspiration, that whole turnaround story is inspirational. And you go back to farms being community owned. They're either community owned or they're driven by community needs, and that's something that's been lost over the last number of decades. And it's without doubt, returning back to the fore. But to hear that story is, absolutely. It's Charlotte. That's so inspiring, and the passion shines through.
Yeah, thank you. And I think James is right. It does make a difference if it's farmer led or if it's community led. And even Ben and I, when we were going through the campaign in 2006. Ben being more the farmer than myself, he was far more sceptical of it and far more worried. And to be honest, when he was going to the farmers markets, he was coming back even more worried when he was speaking to more farmers in the industry, and everyone was telling them that it wouldn't work and it wasn't the right idea. And I think, farming unfortunately has been downtrodden over the years and has kind of been pushed and pulled in so many different ways.
Well, I think
it's easy to see that the community can be that supportive.
Yeah. I think it's very much a personal opinion, not a happy opinion, but I think it's been politicised. I think grants and subsidy, made at a European scale have done no favours long term. And I think whatever anyone thinks about Brexit, it is creating. It will, I think, as subsidies reduce, it will create opportunity. And it will return provenance and profit back to farming, because farming will actually meet and connect with the needs of the market, and not for the sake of a political judgment. And it's a transit and somewhat painful period, but people like you are leading that. Leading that change, and organisations behind you like Plunkett are going, well, look, you can create viability, you can create estate prosperity, you can create employment, but don't look at it necessarily as being something that sits aside from the community, but actually ingratiate it right down to the actual kind of organization that you create to manage it. You know, it's a seismic changes that we're running through now, and it's a remodeling, and I think it's the estate managers and the estate owners that might be on this call that sees that and start modeling this, you know, on at least part of those estates that are going to, you know, help lead that way that you're passionately pursuing.
Yeah, absolutely. Julia, do you want to come in with your question? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Anne, and thank you everybody who's spoken tonight. It's been a fascinating afternoon, evening, and I have followed Ford Hall actually since its inception, off and on, I have to say. And James, I am on the Plunkett mailing list, but I own a farm, a small farm, and I'd be really interested to hear how this vehicle could work, how the Ford Hall type of model could work from an owner's perspective, as opposed to the situation where in Ford Hall you were tenant farmers and you set this up as a community enterprise, and it's now owned by the community. I'd be interested to see how a model could be worked out, something similar, because I am looking, and I think people at CLA know this, for a way forward with my farm to ensure its long-term viability, because I personally don't want to just sell it in the open market. It'll just go the way of so many farms, and I think I've got a very valuable asset, valuable, I'm not talking financially, but in every other way as well. So I don't know whether James or Charlotte could give me some guidance. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, James, you'll probably want to come in on this as well. And to be honest, Julia, I think this is a problem that I've heard many times. And there are a few community land trusts that have set up that will purchase farms and hold them in a wider community land trust, and then rent them out. The Biodiversity Community Land Trust is one. I think there's Ecological Land Cooperative, and there might be some others that James knows of. It's also something that we might look into ourselves into the future, is to bring in more farms into kind of under the Ford Hall umbrella as a possibility. But I think the question is, what happens when you're not here to the land? And I think that's the big thing, and how you could extract the value out of it, or your family, or you might need at that point. And I think that is a big problem in the industry. And yes, parts of our model can be applied that way, but how does that smooth transition, I think, still needs a lot more working out. I don't know, James, if you've got any comments as well on that.
But I agree with exactly what you've said, but in some ways I'm thinking, if you own the asset and you want to sort of follow the model that Charlotte's gone down, it's almost easier, because you haven't got the battle of the other landowner to work with and around. So I'm just thinking, we see many sort of shops transition in that process, where you've got a shop owner, a private owner that wishes to retire at a certain point, and they sort of plan their retirement and work with the community over a number of years to think about how it would be transitioned. And then very often they continue playing a role in the management of it for as long as they wish, or as long as planned. So if I've understood the question correctly, I think it could be an even simpler sort of route than what Charlotte had to go through.
Yeah, and actually,
I know you had a very difficult route, but
you could do it down the share farming route as well, and you could have, like as James said, it could almost, you steal a little bit from different models, and you kind of create a new one, but you end up in a similar place. And to be honest, most of the farms that I've worked with have been in similar situations with yourself, Julia's. Kind of they need to get some land value out of it, but they want it to stay farming. They don't want it to just be split up and sold off. They don't want it to go for development. They want it, but people can't afford to buy a farm and pay a mortgage off on a farmer's income, you know, because land is just worth too much money. And this whole problem around land value is huge. There's another organisation, Shared Assets, that's doing a lot of research into this very issue at the moment as well, and we're working with them. It's something we want to get much more involved in the future, because it's a big issue and we need to try and streamline some of these processes to make it easier. But there's massive opportunities there. And I think what we've seen is that the public, when you give them an opportunity in the right way and you make it easy for them, are really keen, really keen.
Yes, I am aware of that, and I think because my background hasn't been entirely in farming. In fact, interestingly, with the earlier speakers, my background has been in the hotel and catering industry. So, and I've done tried various things on the farm, but nothing that is a model that I can take forward so that I can exit, but still retain my interest in the farm during my lifetime, really. So maybe I have to have a word with James. I
was trying to type at the same time to say do get in touch. So I'll put my contact details in the chat.
Thank you, James.
Do get in touch.
And Charlotte, thank you as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I may also add, please. So we've been in contact with a number of farmers, particularly in the Cornwall area. For instance, there was a farmer who had been farming for 50 years, but he reached the stage whereby his children are not interested to take over the land, and he liked to pursue love, but not willing to, or rather, he's worried about selling the land at the moment, and worried about if he were to lease it, and as what Charlotte said earlier, what if it's not, if it's a 10, 20 years lease, and what if the people don't look after it in the same agroecological way that he'd been looking after it? That means looking after the soil and the biodiversity of the soil, and so one of the ways that we are working with him is to look at the different ways to lease it to people who are interested in the same farming methods. That means looking after the land, the soil in the same way as he does. And I think there's great opportunities for landowners like you, as well as agroecological farmers and new entrants as well to come into farming.
Okay, thank you.
I see we had a question from Daisy, which I think has been answered, and I think it also leads on from Julia's point as well about business models working under a tenanted farm, but that's the same as looking at share farming. I think there's opportunities probably throughout, as you've just been discussing, both Charlotte and James. Catherine, I just want to come to you before we wrap up, just to understand, you mentioned about developing a sustainable e-commerce platform. I just wondered how something like that would benefit farmers and growers, perhaps.
Sure. So in a number of ways. So one of the things that I probably went on quite a lot about earlier is about spreading risk and rewards, and it's something that I take genuine interest in. Second issue is about increasing income. And so it's rightly discussed earlier by Matt and a number of you, the reducing subsidies is a serious concern for a lot of small scale and small and medium scale farmers, not just the large ones. And so what we're looking to do with the e-commerce platform is, first of all, at least for this year, focusing on repurposing agricultural waste. And they are not waste, they are valuable commodities. We're talking about feathers, we're talking about wool, we're talking about leather that have unfortunately deemed as waste. So that's looking at increasing income for farmers, and the other things I'm particularly interested about is also sharing of information. And earlier on, I talked about the farmer who were responsible and nature-friendly farmer who quite frankly, like to move on with his life, but does not trust the current system to leave the land to a new buyer or to lease the land. And so one of the things that we help farmers like this is to connect them with new entrants farmers or other ecological farmers who are interested to take over.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's very interesting model. Thank you for that. So I think really we've actually run over our time slightly. So thank you to all the speakers this evening. It's been really fascinating, and as Leslie has just said, great presentation, and I'm now inspired to get cracking on the farm. So let's hope we have plenty of those. And obviously, as I say, we have recorded this evening, and we will make it available to other members. And if there are any further questions that come to mind after this, please do not hesitate to get in touch. And hopefully you've got everyone's contact details. Really interesting. I've also learned a lot this evening. Thank you very much to our speakers and to our attendees.